Hello, my name is Dr. Diwan S. Raja. Today I will discuss about the openings of the paranasal sinuses in the lateral nasal wall. We have four paranasal sinuses: the frontal sinuses, the maxillary sinuses, the sphenoidal sinuses, and the ethmoidal sinuses. We know the functions of the sinuses. They lighten our skull, they add resonance to the voice, and they keep the nose moist, and they have air conditioning action, antibacterial action. So they have a lot of function, and we must know where they open in the lateral nasal wall. All of the paranasal sinuses opens into the meatuses, with one exception, that is the sphenoidal sinus. It opens into the Sphenoethmoidal Recess. So we'll go through the meatuses and concha. Those are present on the lateral wall of the nasal cavity. So if we go there, we have the frontal sinus, the frontal sinuses, we have the ethmoidal sinuses, maxillary sinuses, and the sphenoidal sinuses. Okay, so the frontal sinuses are located in the frontal bone. We have to identify that structure. That is the frontal bone. This is the frontal sinus here. Frontal sinus. This is sphenoid bone. It contains the sphenoidal sinus. These are the spaces, air spaces, and this is the mucous membrane lined by respiratory epithelium or pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. So we have two frontal sinuses and two maxillary sinuses. Then we have the two sphenoidal sinus. In the sphenoid, we have a septum there. So if you go there, this is the sphenoid sinus. This is present in the sphenoidal bone. This is the maxillary sinus that is present in the maxilla. And these are the ethmoidal air cells. Those are present in the ethmoid bone. So ethmoidal air cells are there. So we got the frontal sinus. This is the frontal sinus. Frontal sinus here, and those sinuses are opening into the lateral nasal wall. In the lateral nasal wall, we'll get the concha and the meatuses. Okay, so if we go to the lateral nasal wall, lateral nasal wall, we have concha. Okay, these are also called turbinates, nasal turbinates or concha. These are shell-like bone. We have the superior concha. This is the superior concha. Superior concha. This is the middle concha. Middle concha. This is the inferior concha. Inferior concha. Okay. So in the lateral nasal wall, we'll get three concha: superior nasal concha. This is the middle nasal concha and inferior nasal concha. These concha are shelf-like extension covered by mucous membrane. These are present in the lateral nasal wall. The superior nasal concha, superior and middle nasal concha are parts of the ethmoidal bone, ethmoidal labyrinth or ethmoidal bone. Okay, so the superior and middle nasal concha are part of the ethmoidal labyrinth. Okay, they are part of the ethmoidal bone, but the inferior nasal concha is a separate bone. Inferior nasal concha is a separate bone. Okay, we got that. These shelf-like bony extensions on the lateral nasal wall. If we look at the model, we find out that we have the superior nasal concha, middle nasal concha, and the inferior nasal concha. Underneath the concha, we have passages. We call them the meatus. So, under the superior nasal concha, we have the superior meatus. Under the middle nasal concha, we have the middle nasal meatus. Under the inferior nasal concha, we have the inferior nasal meatus, or just inferior meatus, superior meatus, middle meatus. Okay, we got the concha and we got superior meatus, middle meatus, and inferior meatus. These are the spaces under the shelfy bone, shell-like bone here. Okay, these two are part of the ethmoid bone. This is a separate bone. We got that. So we got the concha and the meatus. Okay, we have the meatus. Okay, we have the superior meatus, middle meatus, and inferior meatus. Okay, we have the meatuses. Meatuses are the passages, deepest passages underneath the concha. So we go to find out where our paranasal sinuses opens. So if we go to the superior meatus of the nose, superior meatus of the nose, superior meatus of the nose receives the posterior ethmoidal cells, ethmoidal air cells, or posterior group of ethmoidal sinuses. Okay, we got that. So here is the superior concha. This has been cut. We got, this is the superior meatus. It receives the posterior ethmoidal air cells. Here is the site of posterior ethmoidal air cells. Okay, we got that. Now we go to the area just above the superior concha, and in front of the sphenoidal bone, that is called Sphenoethmoidal Recess. Sphenoethmoidal Recess. Okay, these are the spaces. Okay, these are spaces between the body of the sphenoid bone, okay, and the upper aspect of the upper part of the superior concha. Okay, so this is the superior concha, this is the sphenoethmoidal recess here, this part is the sphenoethmoidal recess, this part. Okay, so here is the opening of the sphenoidal bone into the sphenoethmoidal recess. This is this area from here. This is the area here. This is the sphenoethmoidal recess. Sphenoethmoidal recess that receives the sphenoethmoidal recess, the opening of the sphenoidal sinus. Okay, so this receives the sphenoidal sinus on each side, sphenoidal sinuses, sphenoidal sinus on each side. Okay, sphenoidal sinus is a paranasal sinus. There is an air space inside the sphenoid bone. That is this is the sphenoidal sinus. It is lined by the respiratory epithelium, pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium, because we know that all the paranasal sinuses are the diverticulum from the nasal cavity embryologically. Okay, so we got the sphenoethmoidal recess receiving the sphenoidal sinus. Okay, this is the cut section of the superior concha, cut section of middle concha, and cut section of the inferior nasal concha. Okay, this is the coronal section of the nose. We get here the superior concha here, superior concha. Okay, this is the middle concha. Okay, this is superior concha, this is the superior concha, this is the middle concha. Okay, and this is the inferior concha. Inferior concha. Okay, we got that. This is the maxillary sinus. Maxillary sinus here, and these are the ethmoidal air cells. Ethmoidal air cells or ethmoidal sinuses, paranasal sinuses. They are group of air cells. We got the sphenoidal sinus opens into the sphenoethmoidal recess here. Then the superior metatarsal nose, it receives the posterior group of ethmoidal air cell or ethmoidal sinuses. Then we go to the middle meatus. So if we take out the middle concha, we'll get, this is the cut section of the middle concha. Okay, this is the cut section of middle concha. Middle concha. Okay, we got that. So underneath the middle concha, we have the middle meatus. That is important to us. If we go to the middle meatus, what are the structures there? Middle meatus. Okay. So if we take out this shelf-like concha, then we will get this appearance. This is the cut section, and we will get the Bulla Ethmoidalis or ethmoidal bulla. Also called ethmoidal bulla or Bulla Ethmoidalis. It receives the middle ethmoidal sinuses or ethmoidal air cells. Ethmoidal air cells. Okay. So this is the bulla. Bulla Ethmoidalis. Bulla Ethmoidalis. Okay. So underneath the Bulla Ethmoidalis, still in the middle meatus, we have the Hiatus Semilunaris. Hiatus Semilunaris. So it is just like semilune, like a moon, half moon, and this is a semilunar bony depression here. Okay, so it is a semilunar depression on the lateral nasal wall here, and that is called Hiatus Semilunaris. Okay, Hiatus Semilunaris. Okay, this is a bony depression, bony crest, deepest crest. Okay, bony depression, we call it Hiatus Semilunaris, and this is important, this depressed bony part, and it has the anterior part, we call it infundibulum. Infundibulum of the ethmoid. Okay. This infundibulum receives the frontal nasal sinuses. Receives frontal nasal sinuses by the frontal nasal duct. Frontal nasal duct. So the infundibulum of the ethmoid receives frontal, this is the frontal, okay, this is the frontal sinus, you can write it frontal sinus. It opens into this part, most anterior part, the infundibulum of the ethmoid. Okay, so if we go there, the Hiatus Semilunaris, this is Hiatus Semilunaris, this is the infundibulum. Okay, this part receives the frontal air sinuses, okay, by means of frontal nasal duct. It also receives the, so it gets the frontal sinus. It also receives the anterior ethmoidal sinuses or air cell. Okay, and we get on the posterior aspect and middle part, maybe mostly in the posterior part, we get the opening for the maxillary sinuses. We may have more than one opening for each maxillary sinus. So this is the opening for posterior part of the Hiatus Semilunaris, opening for the maxillary sinus. Okay, on each side, on both sides. sinuses. We got that? The opening there. Okay. So let us summarize again. Frontal sinus opens into the anterior part of the hiatus semilunaris by means of frontal nasal duct, and this part is called infundibulum of the ethmoid, and infundibulum of the ethmoid also receives the anterior group of ethmoidal air cells. Just above the hiatus semilunaris under the middle concha, inside the middle meatus, we have the Bulla Ethmoidalis, a swelling or elevation of bone, shelly bone, and that is called Bulla Ethmoidalis. There is an opening there for the middle group of ethmoidal air cell. To the superior meatus of the nose, here opening for the posterior group of ethmoidal air cell. Okay, and maxillary sinuses open into the hiatus semilunaris, into the posterior part. It may have more than one opening to the hiatus semilunaris. Hiatus semilunaris is a bony depression in a semilunar bony depression on the lateral nasal wall. Okay, we got that. Now we'll add few more things. These are not nasal sinuses, but we have to know that. Few more things like that. The inferior nasal meatus, inferior nasal meatus, that is underneath the inferior nasal concha, junction between anterior 1/3, posterior 2/3. Here, this is the opening for the nasolacrimal duct. This is the opening for the nasolacrimal duct. Okay. Junction between anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3 of the inferior nasal meatus. Here is the opening for the nasolacrimal duct. Okay. We got the nasolacrimal duct opening into the inferior meatus of the nose. It is guarded by a mucous valve called Husner's valve. Husner's valve. Okay, it is a valve. We call it Husner valve. Okay, we got that Husner valve. Okay, so we got the paranasal sinuses is opening. Again, the sphenoidal sinus opens into the Sphenoethmoidal recess, not in the meatuses. The posterior ethmoidal air cell opens into the superior meatus of the nose. The middle group of ethmoidal air cell opens into the Bulla Ethmoidalis. To the infundibulum of the hiatus semilunaris, anterior part opening of the frontal sinus by means of the frontal nasal duct, and also it receives the anterior group of ethmoidal air cell. Okay, here opening for the maxillary sinuses. In the inferior meatus of the nose, we have the opening for the nasolacrimal duct. One more thing we must, before conclusion, we have one opening here, junction between the perpendicular plate of palatine bone and the sphenoid bone. We have an opening. It is called Spanopalatine Foramen. Okay, so it is a communication to the pterygopalatine fossa. This is the Spanopalatine Foramen. Spanopalatine Foramen. That is present the junction between the perpendicular plate of the palatine bone and the body of the sphenoid bone. Okay, we got that, and that's all about the opening of the paranasal sinuses into the lateral nasal wall. If you like my video, please support my channel. Please subscribe me, share the information with your friends, and have a nice day. Bye now.